Boi. Come. Bashalan. In the peace. Atele. Putting crown on. Byler. Her husband. Boi Kailar. Come bride. This is a beautiful Hebrew wedding song, as if the angels in heaven are calling for the bride who has been waiting for 6,000 years to stand up bravely and put on the crown of glory for the coming King of Heaven.
大家好，欢迎来到以诺谈天节目。今天我们讲亚伯拉罕的故事第4部分。怒火中烧，劈神像，子顶覆碎，复贪生。火炉3昼，3夜望，毫发未损，亚伯兰。前面我们说了，上帝在创造天地之先就呼唤亚伯兰2次，伯兰，伯兰。伯兰出生见天象，宁录王要杀他，结果仆人的儿子代替了亚伯兰，神救了他。亚伯兰苦寻上帝，宁录建塔办天庭。
Hello everyone, welcome to EnochTH show. Today we begin the story of Abraham, part 4. In anger, Abram burned idols of false gods and smashed the idols of Nimrod. Father was afraid of death, so used his son for scapegoat. Abram was thrown in the furnace for 3 days and 3 nights. But he walked out without damage even a single hair. In the previous sections we talked before the creation of the heaven and the earth. God called Abram twice, Burim and Burim. Abram was born, and King Nimrod wanted to kill him, but his servant's son took Abram's place. God saved him. Abram searched so hard for the way of back to heaven. Nimrod built a tower to rebel against heaven.
下面我们来看这部分，基本上是取自亚萨尔书。亚萨尔书第11章。古时的儿子宁录仍在是拿地治理、居住、建造城邑。他所造的4座城名字是这些，是按着造巴别塔时发生的各样奇异的事而命名的。他称第1座巴别，意思是因耶和华在那里变乱地上的语言。第2座称为以利，因神从那时赶散他们。他称第3座亚甲，意思是那地方曾有大战。第4座叫甲尼，因他的臣宰和勇士在那时被消灭，他们惹怒耶和华，背叛他，得罪他。当宁录在示拿地建成完工后，他将他国中余剩的人民、臣宰和勇士安置在其中。宁录住在巴别城，在那里重新建立他的政权，治理余下的百姓，他的政权稳固，百姓和臣宰称他暗拉菲，意思是在塔上，他的臣宰和人民从他手中坠落。但宁录仍不转向耶和华，他仍旧行恶，并教导人去行。他的儿子马东比他更恶，继续加增他父亲的憎恶。他使人犯罪，因此有话说，从恶生出恶来。那时韩的后代诸族，在他们自己所造、所居住的城里彼此征战。以兰王基大老玛离开韩的后代诸族，与他们征战，并制服了他们。他前往平原5城，在那里打败他们，被他控制。他们服侍他12年，每年向他纳税。他拉的儿子亚伯兰49岁那年，希路的儿子拿赫那时死了。亚伯兰50岁那年，从罗亚家里出来，回到他父亲家中。亚伯兰认识耶和华，按他的道和教训行，耶和华神与他同在。那些日子，他父亲他拉是宁录王的军长，依旧随从外邦神。亚伯半看到他父亲家中的12个神仍立在殿中， 就因看见这些神像发怒气。时期亚伯兰说：“我指着永生的耶和华起誓，这些神像必不得留在我父家中。若我在3日内不把他们打碎，造我的耶和华可如此待我。”18亚伯兰愤怒地离开，他疾步从屋中前往他父亲的外院，看到父亲坐在院中，众仆人随着他，亚伯兰便来坐在他面前。19亚伯兰问父亲说：“我父，请告诉我，创造天和地，地上的人，并你和我的神在哪里？”他拉回答说：“看，那些造我们的都与我们一同在这个家中。”20亚伯兰对他父亲说：“我主，求你施恩，将他们显给我看。”他拉便带亚伯兰进入内院的屋子里。亚伯兰看见满屋尽是木头与石头造的神，12尊大象，并无数的小象。21他拉对儿子说：“看，就是他们造了地上一切你所看到的，造了你和我并所有人。”22他拉在他的众神面前下拜，就离开了。亚伯兰跟着他。23亚伯兰离开他们之后，去见他母亲，在他面前坐下，说：“看哪，父亲将造天和地并所有人的那些神显给我看了。”24现在快到羊群里去，拿一只山羊羔做成美味，我好献给我父亲的神吃，或者我能因此被他们悦纳。25他母亲照做了，宰了一只羊羔做成美味给亚伯兰。亚伯兰从他母亲那里接过美味，拿去给他父亲的神。他摆进他们，好使他们能吃。他拉并不知道此事。26那日，亚伯兰坐在他们中间，发现他们不能说，不能听，不能动，也没有一个伸出他的手去吃。27亚伯兰嗤笑他们，说：“他们不悦纳我所预备的美味，也许太少，他们不肯吃。明日我要准备更多更好的美味，我好看看如何。”28第2日，亚伯兰吩咐他母亲做美味。他母亲起身从羊群中拿了3只上好的羊羔，做成极佳的美味，是他儿子所喜爱的，交给亚伯兰。他父亲他拉不知此事。29亚伯兰接过美味，带到屋里给他父亲的神吃。他靠近他们，以便他们能吃。他摆在他们面前，整日坐着，思想他们也许会吃。30亚伯兰看着他们，他们不能说，不能听，也无一能伸手吃肉。31那日傍晚，亚伯兰在屋中被神的灵环绕。32他呼喊道：“我父和这邪恶的世代有祸了，他们的心都偏于邪，去使奉那木头和石头造的偶像。他们既不能吃，不能闻，不能听，也不能说，有口不能言，有眼不能看，有眼不能听，有手不能摸，有腿不能行。造他的要和他一样，反靠他的也要如此。”33亚伯兰见这一切，向父亲生气，他快速拿起一把斧头，进入摆放神像的屋子，将父亲的神像都打碎了。34行完此事，他将斧头放在众神面前的一个大神手中，便出去了。他父亲他拉回到家里，正进门时，听到斧头敲打的声音，便进屋看个究竟。35他拉听到神像屋里传来斧头响声，跑进屋去，遇见亚伯兰正出来。36他拉进屋，发现偶像全都仆倒摔碎，那尊没碎的大神像手中拿着斧子，他儿子亚伯兰做的美味陈列在前。37他拉见此，极其恼怒，冲出屋去找亚伯兰。38见亚伯兰仍坐在屋里，对他说：“你对我的神都做了什么？”39亚伯兰回答他拉说：“我主，不是这样。我拿美味给他们吃，我把肉递到他们面前，好让他们吃。 他们在大神伸手之前都伸手抢来吃。40那位大神见此，非常恼怒，便去把屋里的斧头取来，把他们都打碎了。看，斧子还在他手中。41他正说时，他拉便对亚伯兰发怒，说：你向我说的是什么胡言？你在说谎。42你所说的这些神岂有灵、魂、能力去行吗？他们不是木头或石头做的吗？岂不是我造他们的吗？你何竟撒谎，说他们当中的大神砸碎他们呢？是你把斧头放在他手里，说他如此行的。43亚伯兰回答说：你岂能侍奉这些没有能力的偶像呢？这些偶像能救你吗？他们听见你的呼求吗？他们岂是救你脱离仇敌的手，为你与仇敌征战，以致你要侍奉这些不能说也不能听的木像石像呢？44你和一切属你的人行这些是不好的。你是如此愚昧无知，缺乏智慧，去侍奉木像或石像，并照样行吗？45忘了耶和华神造了天和地，并地上的你，因是奉石像木像，就是恶临到你们身上吗？46我们的祖先在古时不是犯此罪吗？耶和华宇宙的神不是使洪水临到他们，毁了全地吗？47你岂能继续侍奉这木像和石像，就是不能听，不能说，也不能救你脱离欺压的，因此使宇宙之神的愤怒临到你呢？48我父，不要做这事，不要将恶带给你和你的家人。49亚伯兰速速从他父亲面前跑开，打起那最大偶像手中的斧子，将偶像砸碎，就离他而去了。50他拉见亚伯兰所行的，急忙从家跑到宁录王那里，俯伏拜王。王说：你要什么？51他说：我恳求我主听我说，50年前我得了一子，他对我的众神如此行也如此说。我主我王，请您派人去把他找来，按着律法审断他，我们好救他脱离这恶。52于是王打发3个仆人去把亚伯兰带到王面前。那日宁录和他众臣宰仆人连同他拉一同坐在他面前。53王对亚伯兰说：你对你父亲和他的众神行了什么事？亚伯兰就用他对父亲说的话回答王，并说：如你所闻，那与众神一同在屋里的大神对他们行了这事。54王对亚伯兰说：他们岂像你说的那样能言能吃吗？亚伯兰回答说：既然他们无此能力，你们为什么还要侍奉他们，使人与你们一同错误呢？55你们想侍奉他们，是因他们能救你们，或是能行各样事呢？你们为何无法得知宇宙的神，他造了你们，有能力使人死，也使人活。56愚昧无知的王啊，你将永远有祸了。57我曾以为你教导你仆人行正直的事，不想你非但如此，倒使全地充满你，并随从你之人的恶。58你岂不知道，岂没听过，你所行的这恶，我们的祖宗在古时也行过，永恒的神使洪水临到，毁灭了他们，并因他们的缘故毁灭了全地。你与你百姓是要起来行同样的事，使耶和华宇宙的神的愤怒倾倒下来，降祸于你们和全地吗？59现在除掉你们中间的恶，侍奉宇宙的神，因你们的灵魂在他手中，好使你们在地上得享安舒。60若你们邪僻的心不听从我，离弃恶道，去侍奉永生的神，你们在末后的日子将在羞辱中死去，就是你和你的百姓，并一切听从你行你恶道的人。61亚伯兰在王和臣宰面前说完，举目望天，说：耶和华查看一切恶人，并要审判他们。 亚萨尔书第12章。一王听了亚伯兰说的，令人将他投入监里。亚伯兰在监里住了10天。后来，王召了各省的君王、首领和圣贤到他面前坐下来，亚伯兰仍旧在监中。3王对首领和圣贤说：“你们是否听闻他拉的儿子亚伯兰对他父亲所行之事？他如此的行了，我便命人带他来，他也如是说了。他并不焦虑，在我面前也不惊惶。如今他被关在牢中。现在我们来决定如何来判断此人。他曾斥责了王，又行了你们所闻的那些事。5众人都回答王说：斥责王的人应把他挂在树上，但因他行了他所说的事，轻看我们的神，他应被火烧死。这是律法的条例。6若王看为美，吩咐王的仆人在砖窑里日夜烧火，我们把此人投进去。王如此行了，命令仆人在王的窑中预备3日3夜的大火，窑在喀斯汀。王又命人将亚伯兰带出监头入火中烧死。7王的众仆人、首领、君主、官长和审判官，地上的居民约90万人，面对火窑观看亚伯兰。8妇女和孩童在屋顶和楼上拥挤着，要看亚伯兰身上将发生的事，他们都站得很远。那日无人不来观看。9亚伯兰前来，王的术士和圣贤看他，对王欢呼说：我们的主啊，我们知道此人就是我们告诉王的那个孩子。他出生那时，天上的大星吞吃了4颗小星。此事距今有50年之久。时他的父亲违背了你的命令，交给你另一个孩子，你也杀了他，借此嘲弄了你。11王听了这些，极其恼怒，差人把他拉带来。12王说：你听见术士所说的吗？你对我说实话，你是怎么做的？你若说实话，我便看你无罪。13他拉见王极其恼怒，就对王说：我主我王，你所听见的都是事实，圣贤所说也是真的。王说：那你为何敢违背我的命令，将非你所生的孩子给我，并拿了他的价值呢？14他拉回答王说：因我为儿子极其动心，于是从我婢女手中取一男孩带给王。15王问：是谁给你出的主意？告诉我，不可对我隐瞒，不然你必死。16他拉在王前非常害怕，说：是我的大儿子哈兰出的主意。亚伯兰出生时，哈兰32岁。17哈兰并未向他父亲出任何主意，他拉只是为了救自己的性命才对王如此说的，因他极其惊恐。王对他拉说：你儿子向你出此主意，应当与亚伯兰一起被火烧死。他因背叛王的命令，当判死刑。18那时，哈兰心里趋向亚伯兰所行的路，只是他将此意藏在心里。19哈兰心里说：王现在因亚伯兰所行的将他拿住，事情将显明，若亚伯兰胜了王，我便跟从他；若王胜了他，我便跟从王。20他拉将他儿子哈兰的事告诉了王，王差人将哈兰与亚伯兰一同拿住。21亚伯兰和他的弟兄哈兰一同被带来，丢进火里。地上所有的居民、王的众仆人、首领和妇女孩子站在他们面前。22王的仆人捉住亚伯兰和他弟兄，扒光他们所有的衣服，只留下里衣。23他们用绳绑了他俩的手脚，王的仆人将他们举起，投进火窑中。24耶和华爱亚伯兰，怜悯他，耶和华下来，从火中救了亚伯兰，使他不被火烧。25他们绑他的绳子都被烧了，亚伯兰完好， 且在火中来回行走。26他们将哈兰投进火里，他就死了，并烧成了灰，因他的心在耶和华面前不完全。投他进火里的人有火焰窜到他们身上，烧死了他们，共有12人。27亚伯兰在火中行走3日3夜，王的所有仆人看见他在火中行走，就去告诉王，说：我们看见亚伯兰在火中行走，连他身上的里衣也未被烧着，只有绑他的绳子被烧了。28王听见他们的话，心就消化了，不相信他们。于是他差其他的忠臣去观看，他们去了，看见了，就回来告诉王。王起身去看，见亚伯兰在火中来回的走，他看见哈兰被烧的身体，极其诧异。29王令人将亚伯兰从火里带出来，他的仆人想要靠近他，却是不能，因火势弥漫，火焰向他们伸过来。30仆人逃跑，王便责备他们说：赶紧把亚伯兰从火里带出来，否则你们都要死。31仆人再次靠近，要带出亚伯兰，火焰朝他们过来，烧着他们的脸，其中死了8人。32王见仆人因不想被火烧死，不敢靠近火窑，便对亚伯兰说：哦，天上神的仆人，从火里出来到我这里来吧。亚伯兰听见王的声音，便从火中出来，站在王面前。33亚伯兰出来，王和众仆人看见他站在王面前，身穿里衣，并未被烧，只烧掉了绑他的绳。34王对亚伯兰说：你是如何做到没被火烧的呢？35亚伯兰回答王：我所信的天地的神是全能的神，他把我从你投我进去的火窑中救出来。36亚伯兰的兄弟哈兰被烧成了灰，他们想要找他的尸身，发现已经消尽了。37哈兰死在喀斯汀火窑时82岁。王、臣宰及地上的居民见亚伯兰被从火中救出来，就俯伏在他面前。38亚伯兰对他们说：不要拜我，当拜那造你们的世界的神，当是奉他，跟从他，因他从火中把我救出来，他造了众人的灵魂，在母腹中形成，将他带到世上一切，他拯救那些信靠他的人，脱离一切艰难。39这一切在王和臣宰眼中看为稀奇，因亚伯兰从火中被救，哈兰却被烧死。王给了亚伯兰许多礼物，并把自己家里的2个重要仆人赐给他，一个叫俄尼，一个叫以利以谢。40所有的君王、首领和仆人给了亚伯兰许多金银和珍珠礼物，王和他的仆人把他平平安安地送走了。41亚伯兰平安地离开，王的许多仆人跟从他，约有300人。42那日，亚伯兰并跟随他的那些人回到他父亲家中，他终生是奉耶和华他的神，行他的道，遵行他的律法。43自那日起，亚伯兰使人心转向侍奉耶和华。44那时，拿鹤和亚伯兰为自己娶妻，就是他们兄弟哈兰的女儿。拿鹤的妻子是密迦，亚伯兰的妻子名叫撒莱。撒莱不生育，那些日子他没有孩子。
Next, let's look at this part, basically taken from the book of Jasher. Book of Jasher, chapter 11. One and Nimrod son of Cush was still in the land of Shinar, and he reigned over it and dwelt there, and he built cities in the land of Shinar. 2 And these are the names of the 4 cities which he built, and he called their names after the occurrences that happened to them in the building of the tower. 3 And he called the first Babel, saying, because the Lord there confounded the language of the whole earth, and the name of the second he called Erech, because from their God dispersed them. 4 And the third he called Esht, saying there was a great battle at that place, and the fourth he called Calneh, because his princes and mighty men were consumed there, and they vexed the Lord, they rebelled and transgressed against him. 5 And when Nimrod had built these cities in the land of Shinar, he placed in them the remainder of his people, his princes and his mighty men that were left in his kingdom. 6 And Nimrod dwelt in Babel, and he there renewed his reign over the rest of his subjects, and he reigned securely, and the subjects and princes of Nimrod called his name Amraphel, saying that at the tower his princes and men fell through his means. 7 And notwithstanding this, Nimrod did not return to the Lord, and he continued in wickedness and teaching wickedness to the sons of men, and Mardon, his son, was worse than his father, and continued to add to the abominations of his father. 8 And he caused the sons of men to sin, therefore it is said, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. 9 At that time there was war between the families of the children of Ham, as they were dwelling in the cities which they had built. 10 And Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, went away from the families of the children of Ham, and he fought with them and he subdued them, and he went to the 5 cities of the plain and he fought against them and he subdued them, and they were under his control. 11 And they served him 12 years, and they gave him a yearly tax. 12 At that time died Nahor, son of Serug, in the 49th year of the life of Abram son of Terah. 13 And in the 50th year of the life of Abram son of Terah, Abram came forth from the house of Noah, and went to his father's house. 14 And Abram knew the Lord, and he went in his ways and instructions, and the Lord his God was with him. 15 And Terah his father was in those days, still captain of the host of King Nimrod, and he still followed strange gods. 16 And Abram came to his father's house and saw 12 gods standing there in their temples, and the anger of Abram was kindled when he saw these images in his father's house. 17 And Abram said, As the Lord liveth, these images shall not remain in my father's house, so shall the Lord who created me do unto me if in 3 days' time I do not break them all. 18 And Abram went from them, and his anger burned within him. And Abram hastened and went from the chamber to his father's outer court, and he found his father sitting in the court, and all his servants with him, and Abram came and sat before him. 19 And Abram asked his father, saying, Father, tell me where is God who created heaven and earth, and all the sons of men upon earth, and who created thee and me? And Terah answered his son Abram and said, Behold, those who created us are all with us in the house. 20 And Abram said to his father, My lord, shew them to me I pray thee. And Terah brought Abram into the chamber of the inner court, and Abram saw, and behold, the whole room was full of gods of wood and stone, 12 great images and others less than they without number. 21 And Terah said to his son, Behold, these are they which made all thou sayest upon earth, and which created me and thee, and all mankind. 22 And Terah bowed down to his gods, and he then went away from them, and Abram, his son, went away with him. 23 And when Abram had gone from them, he went to his mother and sat before her, and he said to his mother, Behold, my father has shown me those who made heaven and earth, and all the sons of men. 24 Now, therefore, hasten and fetch a kid from the flock, and make of it savory meat, that I may bring it to my father's gods as an offering for them to eat, perhaps I may thereby become acceptable to them. 25 And his mother did so, and she fetched a kid, and made savory meat thereof, and brought it to Abram, and Abram took the savory meat from his mother and brought it before his father's gods, and he drew nigh to them that they might eat, and Terah his father did not know of it. 26 And Abram saw on the day when he was sitting amongst them, that they had no voice, no hearing, no motion, and not one of them could stretch forth his hand to eat. 27 And Abram mocked them, and said, Surely the savory meat that I prepared has not pleased them, or perhaps it was too little for them, and for that reason they would not eat. Therefore tomorrow I will prepare fresh savory meat, better and more plentiful than this, in order that I may see the result. 28 And it was on the next day that Abram directed his mother concerning the savory meat, and his mother rose and fetched 3 fine kids from the flock, and she made of them some excellent savory meat, such as her son was fond of, and she gave it to her son Abram, and Terah his father did not know of it. 29 And Abram took the savory meat from his mother, and brought it before his father's gods into the chamber, and he came nigh unto them that they might eat, and he placed it before them, and Abram sat before them all day, thinking perhaps they might eat. 30 And Abram viewed them, and behold they had neither voice nor hearing, nor did one of them stretch forth his hand to the meat to eat. 31 And in the evening of that day in that house Abram was clothed with the Spirit of God. 32 And he called out and said, Woe unto my father in this wicked generation, whose hearts are all inclined to vanity, who serve these idols of wood and stone which can neither eat, smell, hear, nor speak, who have mouths without speech, eyes without sight, ears without hearing, hands without feeling, and legs which cannot move, like them are those that made them and that trust in them. 33 And when Abram saw all these things his anger was kindled against his father, and he hastened and took a hatchet in his hand, and came unto the chamber of the gods, and he broke all his father's gods. 34 And when he had done breaking the images, he placed the hatchet in the hand of the great God which was there before them, and he went out, and Terah his father came home, for he had heard at the door the sound of the striking of the hatchet, so Terah came into the house to know what this was about. 35 And Terah, having heard the noise of the hatchet in the room of images, ran to the room to the images, and he met Abram going out. 36 And Terah entered the room and found all the idols fallen down and broken, and the hatchet in the hand of the largest, which was not broken, and the savory meat which Abram his son had made was still before them. 37 And when Terah saw this his anger was greatly kindled, and he hastened and went from the room to Abram. 38 And he found Abram his son still sitting in the house, and he said to him, What is this work thou hast done to my gods? 39 And Abram answered Terah his father, and he said, Not so my lord, for I brought savory meat before them, and when I came nigh to them with the meat that they might eat, they all at once stretched forth their hands to eat before the great one had put forth his hand to eat. 40 And the large one saw their works that they did before him, and his anger was violently kindled against them, and he went and took the hatchet that was in the house and came to them and broke them all, and behold the hatchet is yet in his hand as thou sayest. 41 And Terah's anger was kindled against his son Abram, when he spoke this, and Terah said to Abram his son in his anger, What is this tale that thou hast told? Thou speakest lies to me. 42 Is there in these God's spirit, soul, or power to do all thou hast told me? Are they not wood and stone, and have I not myself made them? And canst thou speak such lies, saying that the large God that was with them smote them? It is thou that didst place the hatchet in his hands, and then sayest he smote them all. 43 And Abram answered his father, and said to him, And how canst thou then serve these idols, in whom there is no power to do anything? Can those idols, in which thou trustest, deliver thee? Can they hear thy prayers when thou criest upon them? Can they deliver thee from the hands of thy enemies, or will they fight thy battles for thee against thy enemies, that thou shouldst serve wood and stone which can neither speak nor hear? 44 And now surely it is not good for thee nor for the sons of men that are connected with thee, to do these things. Are you so silly, so foolish, or so short of understanding that you will serve wood and stone, and do after this manner? 45 And forget the Lord God who made heaven and earth, and who created you in the earth, and thereby bring a great evil upon your souls in this matter by serving stone and wood? 46 Did not our fathers in days of old sin in this matter, and the Lord God of the universe brought the waters of the flood upon them and destroyed the whole earth? 47 And how can you continue to do this and serve gods of wood and stone, who cannot hear, or speak, or deliver you from oppression, thereby bringing down the anger of the God of the universe upon you? 48 Now therefore my father refrain from this, and bring not evil upon thy soul and the souls of thy household. 49 And Abram hastened and sprang from before his father, and took the hatchet from his father's largest idol, with which Abram broke it and ran away. 50 And Terah, seeing all that Abram had done, hastened to go from his house, and he went to the king, and he came before Nimrod and stood before him, and he bowed down to the king, and the king said, What dost thou want? 51 And he said, I beseech thee my lord, to hear me now. 50 years back a child was born to me, and thus has he done to my gods, and thus has he spoken. And now therefore, my lord and king, send for him, that he may come before thee, and judge him according to the law, that we may be delivered from his evil. 52 And the king sent 3 men of his servants, and they went and brought Abram before the king. And Nimrod and all his princes and servants were that day sitting before him, and Terah sat also before them. 53 And the king said to Abram, What is this that thou hast done to thy father and to his gods? And Abram answered the king in the words that he spoke to his father, and he said, The large God that was with them in the house did to them what thou hast heard. 54 And the king said to Abram, Had they power to speak and eat and do as thou hast said? And Abram answered the king, saying, And if there be no power in them, why dost thou serve them and cause the sons of men to err through thy follies? 55 Dost thou imagine that they can deliver thee or do anything small or great, that thou shouldst serve them? And why wilt thou not sense the God of the whole universe, who created thee and in whose power it is to kill and keep alive? 56 Foolish, simple, and ignorant king, woe unto thee forever. 57 I thought thou wouldst teach thy servants the upright way, but thou hast not done this, but hast filled the whole earth with thy sins and the sins of thy people who have followed thy ways. 58 Dost thou not know, or hast thou not heard, that this evil which thou doest, our ancestors sinned therein in days of old, and the eternal God brought the waters of the flood upon them and destroyed them all, and also destroyed the whole earth on their account? And wilt thou and thy people rise up now and do like unto this work, in order to bring down the anger of the Lord God of the universe, and to bring evil upon thee and the whole earth? 59 Now therefore put away this evil deed which thou doest, and serve the God of the universe, as thy soul is in his hands, and then it will be well with thee. 60 And if thy wicked heart will not hearken to my words to cause thee to forsake thy evil ways, and to serve the eternal God, then wilt thou die in shame in the latter days, thou, thy people and all who are connected with thee, hearing thy words or walking in thy evil ways. 61 And when Abram had ceased speaking before the king and princes, Abram lifted up his eyes to the heavens, and he said, The Lord seeth all the wicked, and he will judge them. Book of Jasher, chapter 12. 1 And when the king heard the words of Abram, he ordered him to be put into prison, and Abram was 10 days in prison. 2 And at the end of those days the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and the sages should come before him, and they sat before him, and Abram was still in the house of confinement. 3 And the king said to the princes and sages, Have you heard what Abram, the son of Terah, has done to his father? Thus has he done to him, and I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken. His heart did not misgive him, neither did he stir in my presence, and behold now he is confined in the prison. For and therefore decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you heard. 5 And they all answered the king, saying, The man who revileth the king should be hanged upon a tree, but having done all the things that he said, and having despised our gods, he must therefore be burned to death, for this is the law in this matter. 6 If it pleaseth the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire both night and day in thy brick furnace, and then we will cast this man into it. And the king did so, and he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace, that is in Casdim, and the king ordered them to take Abram from prison and bring him out to be burned. 7 And all the king's servants, princes, lords, governors, and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abram. 8 And all the women and little ones crowded upon the roofs and towers to see what was doing with Abram, and they all stood together at a distance, and there was not a man left that did not come on that day to behold the scene. 9 And when Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and the sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, Our sovereign lord, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, which we declared to the king now 50 years since. 10 And behold, now his father has also transgressed thy commands, and mocked thee by bringing thee another child, which thou didst kill. 11 And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly wroth, and he ordered Terah to be brought before him. 12 And the king said, Hast thou heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how didst thou? And if thou shalt speak truth, thou shalt be acquitted. 13 And seeing that the king's anger was so much kindled, Terah said to the king, My lord and king, thou hast heard the truth, and what the sages have spoken is right. And the king said, How couldst thou do this thing, to transgress my orders, and to give me a child that thou didst not beget, and to take value for him? 14 And Terah answered the king, Because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time, and I took a son of my handmaid, and I brought him to the king. 15 And the king said, Who advised thee to this? Tell me, do not hide aught from me, and then thou shalt not die. 16 And Terah was greatly terrified in the king's presence, and he said to the king, It was Haran my eldest son who advised me to this, and Haran was in those days that Abram was born 32 years old. 17 But Haran did not advise his father to anything, for Terah said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. And the king said to Terah, Haran thy son who advised thee to this shall die through fire with Abram, for the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this thing. 18 And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but he kept it within himself. 19 And Haran said in his heart, Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did, and it shall come to pass, that if Abram prevail over the king I will follow him, but if the king prevail I will go after the king. 20 And when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. 21 And they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire, and all the inhabitants of the land and the king's servants and princes and all the women and little ones were there, standing that day over them. 22 And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes excepting their lower garments which were upon them. 23 And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords, and the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. 24 And the Lord loved Abram, and he had compassion over him, and the Lord came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. 25 But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. 26 And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with the Lord, and those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burned, and 12 men of them died. 27 And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire, and they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned, but the cord with which he was bound is burned. 28 And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter, and they went and saw it and told it to the king. And the king rose to go and see it, and he saw Abram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire, and he saw Haran's body burned, and the king wondered greatly. 29 And the king ordered Abram to be taken out from the fire, and his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was round about and the flame ascending toward them from the furnace. 30 And the king's servants fled from it, and the king rebuked them, saying, Make haste and bring Abram out of the fire, that you shall not die. 31 And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out, and the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so that 8 of them died. 32 And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram, O servant of the God who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire and come hither before me. And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king, and he went forth from the fire and came and stood before the king. 33 And when Abram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abram coming before the king, with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned, but the cord with which he was bound was burned. 34 And the king said to Abram, How is it that thou wast not burned in the fire? 35 And Abram said to the king, The God of heaven and earth, in whom I trust and who is all in his power, he delivered me from the fire into which thou didst cast me. 36 And Haran the brother of Abram was burned to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. 37 And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Kasdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Abram. 38 And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the God of the world who made you, and serve him, and go in his ways, for it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and spirits of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world, and it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain. 39 And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Abram was saved from the fire and that Haran was burned, and the king gave Abram many presents, and he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of one was Oni, and the name of the other was Eleazar. 40 And all the kings, princes and servants gave Abram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl, and the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. 41 And Abram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him, and about 300 men joined him. 42 And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him, and Abram served the Lord his God all the days of his life, and he walked in his ways and followed his law. 43 And from that day forward Abram inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve the Lord. 44 And at that time Nahor and Abram took unto themselves wives, the daughters of their brother Haran. The wife of Nahor was Milcah, and the name of Abram's wife was Sarai. And Sarai, wife of Abram, was barren, she had no offspring in those days.
以色列拉比解经提到，哈兰要等到看见亚伯兰的结果，再决定信亚伯兰的神。结果上帝没给他机会看见结果。下回书第5部分， 我们讲50岁的亚伯兰第一次进入迦南地，命路噩梦起杀心，老仆深夜来报警。天上应徐勇祝福，50出入迦南地。谢谢大家收听以诺谈天节目，希望大家顺着次序听，我们下回见。
Rabbi of Israel mentioned that Haran had to wait until he saw Abram's result before deciding to believe in Abram's God, but God didn't give him a chance to see the result. In the fifth part, we will talk about the 50-year-old Abram entering Canaan for the first time. Nimrod had a nightmare and wanted to kill Abram. And the old servant came to tell Abram warning at middle night. Heaven promised eternal blessings. And Abram entered the land of Canaan in his early 50s. Thank you for listening to the Enoch Talk Show. I hope you will listen to it in order, and see you next time.